Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank you for joining us today for our webinar, A Framework for Maker Education. I'm Matt Mulder, Executive Director of Innovation at Demco, and I'll be moderating today's session. Before we get started, I just wanted to go through some housekeeping details, and then I'll introduce our speaker. On your screens, you should see a question box on the right-hand side. If you have a question or need technical help, please use this box to communicate with us. If we don't get to your question during the session, we will be posting questions and answers along with the recorded webcasts, presentation slides, and resources after the event. You will receive an email in about a week letting you know when everything is available. You'll also notice our presenters' contact information as well as mine. Please feel free to contact us directly with any questions that haven't been answered in the follow-up resources. We are also using Twitter today with the hashtag DemcoIdeas. You should be able to see this hashtag on the side of your screen in the chat box. We are monitoring that feed as well for questions and comments. I believe that's all the housekeeping I have, so let's get started with the program. I'm very excited to introduce you to our speaker today, Mark Schreiber. Mark is a Stanford Senior FabLearn Fellow with over 15 years in technology, engineering, digital fabrication, and design. Mark consults for schools and corporations worldwide to help bring more design and innovation into classrooms and makerspaces. With bachelor's degrees in technology education and industrial technology, as well as a Master of Science in construction technology and engineering education, Mark is already an active member of the Maker generation. He is the owner and creative editor of the open source Design Case curriculum and a member of MIT's International Fab Lab Network. Mark is recognized as an outstanding educator and a leader in makerspace implementation. Most notably, Mark was named National Teacher of the Year by the Millikan Family Foundation. Mark has sat on the NSF Creative IT panel, school boards, and currently curates for Google's Startup Digest for all things maker. He is also the inventor of the Design Case, a maker lab in a box that teaches children and adults alike how to innovate, blending low-fidelity materials and high-tech know-how to create value and promote entrepreneurship. We're so excited to have Mark with us today to talk more about making education. Looks like we're ready to get started, so Mark, you can take it away whenever you're ready.
Hey, thanks, Matt, and appreciate you having me on today for this, and I'm excited to talk about how to integrate making and hands-on education into your schools, classrooms, libraries as we get going. So I'll move forward. Let me get the... So a couple different ways that you could contact me. You can follow me on Twitter if you'd like to at Mark Schreiber, or Design Case Co. is our website. And I titled this one A Framework for Maker Education because Demco's really been working with trying to help students and educators like yourselves feel comfortable as they walk into making. So sometimes you have all these different activities and all these different things that you could do, but you don't really know where that's going to work with your curriculum, where that's going to work with you know, all the different things that you already have to do, that you're already kind of on the hook for, right, for standards and your admin and your libraries, all the different programs that are already in there. How do you kind of take this and ease into it in a way that works for students and, quite honestly, works well for educators so they're not feeling overwhelmed? So with that, I really feel like there's a couple things we have to talk about first before we kind of talk about how to do it. And so you could almost call this presentation the what, why, and how of integrated making as well. But I feel like there's so many different things out there. There's, you know, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEAM when we add the A for art, or STREAM when the librarians grab hold and art reading in there. But really the basis of it isn't the actual acronym or even the different components of that. The big part of it is that why below why we're implementing it. So, but the questions that come out first, though, before we kind of get to the why, is things like, hey, the practicals. Wow, hey, I don't know if I can do this. How do I add this making? How do I get this in there? How much is it going to cost? Where are we going to put it? What's it look like? Where does it fit into the curriculum? And all those are great questions, but I think, once again, you have to grab that why almost below why you're doing these things, and then those questions almost magically solve themselves. And we'll get to that here in just a second. So everybody wants a program. Everybody wants steps. Everybody wants a recipe as they walk out making in their classroom. And I think administrators say, okay, let's get integrated making into your school. We're going to start a special. We're going to make another PE. We're going to make art. We'll have music, and we'll have making. And that can be a fine way of doing it. But I feel like in a lot of ways that just adds another layer of complexity when you already have all the tools and get some new materials, in your classrooms or in the libraries to kind of just grab this as an after-school lunch program activities, or just bring your history educators in, or your science, or your homeroom teachers, and have them actually start making. So I would say the steps, and I didn't put it in this presentation, but the steps look a little bit more like a treasure map. You have to walk around and try to figure out where you're going, but everybody wants this linear step-by-step. And once again, I think that Demco's done a really good job of kind of blending that treasure map that can be so kind of nebulous and hard to grab hold of, and they've blended it with a way where you can kind of take some of these steps. So I left the steps picture in there because we all want the steps. Once again, though, before we get to the steps, I really think these foundations are what help set the tone of making, and kind of gives us all the steps as we go. So I've broken it down to 3 objectives of making, and I look at it like a stool. So you have this a 3-legged stool, and if you take one of the legs away, then it just falls over. So once again, back to those questions of how much is it going to cost, and where are we going to put it, and all that stuff, I think that kind of goes into the skills and depth of knowledge area over here. And people just want to know, okay, well, we need to get kids skills. We need to have the right tools to get them these skills. We need the right place to get them the skills. How much are those tools going to cost? How much is that place going to cost? And that's a great leg to stand on or to sit on this 3-legged stool. But the other 2, I think, are just as important as we start making. And these are probably the 2 more forgotten ones. Maker mindset, if you're at ISTE, International Society of Tech Ed, this year, even ALA, or even the art conferences, there's so much talk right now on Edutopia and other sites and in conferences about what is the maker mindset. And we're going to explore that a little bit today, because that's a big part. If we can't have kids walking into a room and not just trying to grab the skills of depth and knowledge, but actually that we can quantify or qualify somehow the maker mindset and help them understand these other aspects of making, that's going to help them have growth too. And that's going to really factor into why you buy what you buy and where you put what you buy. Creative confidence, communication is another big, powerful leg of that stool. And this really goes into some of those 21st century skill sets, the 4 C's, right? These are a few of them right there. But collaboration is in there. You're getting kids to ask questions instead of just doing another how-to manual. And I think if we focus on the skills of depth and knowledge right here, instead of these other 2, if we slant too far that way, then what happens is you get all about the qualitative, what did we learn, compared to how did we learn it, and how did this get the kids the ability to solve a problem that we don't have the answer for. And that's a lot of what making is all about. So if we can get kids in a room together and help them find that creative confidence, communication, start to ask the right questions, that's a big part of making. If I had to pick, when I go to schools, and I help schools and corporations, as Matt said, when I go, there's a lot of questions of where are we programmatically going to put this. And because of those 3 that I just talked about earlier, I think the best place, and sometimes the easiest place to put this, is to integrate it into your existing curriculum. Up here on these pictures, you've got some strawbees. On the left, you've got a student doing scribble bots, which are basically a motor that vibrates, and some simple craft materials, and challenge them to draw circles or dots or put as much ink on the page. And then design, and there's some storage materials right there. But I think the integrated portion of this is, once again, as an elementary educators, when I often talk to them, they're already burdened, right? We always have so many different things as educator, no matter what level you are in, but especially in the elementary, there's all this stuff that you have to do. And so if you're excited about integrating making, that's fine, or adding making to your classroom, but I think a lot of people say, well, where am I going to put it, right? I mean, how am I going to fit this in? And so your pain point that needs to be solved is how do we use making in a way that actually adds value to what you're already doing. So is there a way that you can integrate it into history or into science or into math or into, you know, even just citizenship in your classroom? What are some things that you can check off and talk to your administrators or talk to your coworkers and say, yeah, kids were excited, they were having fun, they were learning, and now they're going to go back and they're going to look at this lesson and it's much more rich now, and hopefully they'll learn it better and test on it better because I integrated it into what I was already doing. And I'll give some examples of that. Here's some different examples you'll see, and I've actually put, at the end of this presentation, I've put a link where you can, all these little arrows, anything that has an arrow, you'll be able to click on, and you can then take you to that site that kind of talks a little bit more about this. But here's some different things. Math, you know, codable lamps. It's probably a little upper elementary, middle school, high school. But what you can do is you can take a vinyl cutter and you can cut some different fractal patterns out using some different a site from MIT called the High Tech Low Tech Group, and what they did is they put together basically these bars that you can move back and forth, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. Bars you can move back and forth, and it changes the fractal shapes, and I've got a better picture on there, but this is more of an overview right now. English is a great place to integrate in, and as you integrate, like I said, I'm kind of a passionate educator on integration because I see it work so well. Integration of electronics into English sounds like a crazy thing to do, but it's amazing. Or even a makey-makey, if you ever looked at that, it's a capacitive touch board. I should have grabbed one from the shelf here, but what it can do is you can use electronic paint or conductive conductive coppers like on this one, and then when students touch different parts of it, it can actually narrate a part of the book, or it can bring a story that they drew and have audio go with it or sound effects go with it. So there's a lot of great stuff in there. There's a site called 21st Century Notebooking or Hack the Notebook that you can look at. Biology, I do this even with educators a lot, where you take, and let me back up just a minute. The reason I like biology and even science down here, Engineering for Change, is because a lot of students, I think when we think making, we go, oh, it's electronics, it's robotics, and that's true. There's definitely electronics and robotics in there, but it's really, once again, about the why, and it's about the process, and it's about getting hands-on and being constructivist, learning through doing. And some students are going to get really excited because you have Legos in the classroom, and they would build Legos whenever they could, or robotics because things move, and you'll get a lot of boys that are really excited potentially, right, about these motors and things that are just, you know, that sound really good. But to get kind of gender parity in there, I have 3 girls, elementary, middle school, and high school right now. And what I found is that things that have a reason to be doing something, to be prototyping, to trying to figure out something, those are the things that really get kids excited, past just doing it for themselves, right? It becomes this external motivation, and that's part of making. So with that, biohack candy is basically the idea of taking spirulina, which is a blue-green algae, can be grown in most climates, and as you take that blue-green algae, the problem is it tastes like blue-green algae, right? It tastes like a pond. So to make it palatable, the challenge that we put out there is for students to basically take this powder and put it into some palatable way, and we use candy as that, so they can kind of make a candy that makes your tongue blue. And the cool thing about this is you can tell students, hey, malnourishment is a real issue in third world countries. Spirulina, blue-green algae, can be grown anywhere. Therefore, can you actually solve a real problem? Could you get kids your age in other countries to actually want to eat this? And so you teach them casting and molding. You can take some brown sugar or coffee grounds or some edible powders, and you can push a little Lego in there and make the reverse image of the Lego, and then you can pour in your hot Jolly Rancher / spirulina candy together, let it set up, and now the kids have that, or a lollipop or whatever. So you're teaching actually engineering principles, and you're solving a world problem, and you're helping kids kind of engage with this, something that they can hook a whole bunch of different information into. Same thing, I'll jump down to science, engineering for change. Why not make a gravel filter or a sand filter, water filter in your classroom? There's a ton of different ways that you could inject science and engineering in there, but once again, for this other problem, which I have a real passion about, as you can see. Art. There's this great interactive sculpture you can kind of see here with the balloons. And what it is it has these LEDs that are on little tiny thin strings of basically stainless steel thread. And each one has a battery on it, basically, that turns on or off the light at different times. And if you code it with some fairly simple things, like you would see a house controller for Christmas lights, you can code these. And what they did is they turned on all the balloons, so they kind of march down or they march back. All these different ways of kind of art patterns. And the reason I really like art is because your students can now create change in your school or in your institution, because now you can create an artistic sculpture or some type of thing that they did now that's interactive, so that when other students walk by it, maybe the sound of them walking by it, using even little bits and a sound sensor, can, you know, snap, oh, this little light thing turned on, or a motor turned on. And it gets the other students that haven't been involved in the project interested in making and hands-on creativity. So these are great things that you can put into a classroom. Makey is a perfect example of how to use that. If you hook it up to anything conductive, students could come over and play drums as they walk around, and you could actually make kind of an exhibit or a bunch of exhibits in your school where making is something that is seen and integrated holistically, not just in your little classroom where they get their grade back or their project back, and they have a limited audience. So I really like that. History, there's a great website from Victoria University that has a humanities section where they have a humanities lab that does making, and they take old things like wallets and they make them new, or radios, and they kind of reverse engineer them and say, what would that look like if we had made it now? And so they do a longitudinal studies of basically the history of how a wallet came and why it became the way it does. Another way that we've done is a historical quilt, where you take a Makey, once again it's Scratch from MIT, which is a little block coding program, and you can take that and you can touch the quilt square that your students made, and they could draw on this little piece of felt, or they could laser cut it if you're a laser cutter, or they could paint it. But when they touch it, the sandwich, basically electronics, would have a positive on the top and a negative on the bottom. When you touch it, it would trigger the Makey to basically play whatever you told it to on Scratch. So Makey is a device that will turn anything into a keyboard key, basically, so, or a set of keyboard keys. So the nice thing about it is when you touch it, it presses the L key, but you tell Scratch, this little programming language, hey, when the L key is pressed, then play this sound. And now the sound that you play is the narration of a student talking about Paul Revere's Ride, or talking about the Liberty Bell, or talking about the Boston Tea Party, right? So then you can do quilts, which are American, and you can do colonies, and you can talk all about these different things. So once again, integration is my passion, and there's so many things. I've only touched on a few right here. So many different ways to integrate making into your classroom, and it helps. I think if you didn't, you know, this is an important part. Making is something that can actually take that burden off your shoulders and can actually add something to your classroom. So it's a win-win for everybody. So try it out. Here's actually the top corner. That's that biohack challenge. Right there, you see some Jolly Ranchers. Up here, you see some. I use silicon muffin tins, silicon muffin. Well, they're not really tins. Inserts, and then I just get them at Bed Bath & Beyond or wherever, and then I cut them into small pieces. And that way, and with the microwave, now you can Jolly Rancher cut, talk about heat safety, depending on the age of the student still. Be very careful, but you can see them casting and molding in little clear cups, right? They've put an indent up here, and then here's the spirulina pills over there that you can break apart and put the powder in. You know, Ozobots are great, if robotics, and Sphero. And I just like this picture here of create and make, because I think as we are making, we need to realize that it's an innovative exercise. We're helping kids learn some skills that maybe aren't hard and fast qualitative skills, but there's all this stuff going on and being hooked together, neurons firing together, that are wiring together in their brains to help them to be more creative. And I really like using design thinking. If you haven't done design thinking is a set of basically a thinking strategy from the D School at Stanford, and you can get a lot of their stuff online for free. Just check out the D School. But design thinking says, hey, we're going to start with empathy. We're going to, once again, try to figure out why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we going to build what we're going to build? So it's not just following a set of tutorial steps, but it's really this rich way of helping students engage in a problem and make sure that it's a real problem. That it's not just, we're not just making more widgets. They're going to end up in the landfill, right? We want to make something that's going to solve a problem that's for a reason. And that's why I really like these engineering for change projects as well. So back to a couple different ones, kind of a detailed or a little deeper into it. Here's that integration of English. And I really like paper circuits. Chibitronics has some stickers, but you can also just get copper tape. You can get some regular 3mm LEDs, light emitting diodes, and a coin cell battery, usually a 2032. They're these little round coin cell batteries. You've seen them a lot. You can kind of see one up there in the picture. And then students can make these flat circuits. And we have a class actually going on in a program that I'm helping with right now where they're doing a kind of a pay it forward class. And every week they're learning a different style. It's a very art and technology infused class. And they're learning how to think about a neighbor or a friend or somebody that could need a card. Right? It's as simple as this. What card do you need? How could I help this person? How could I cheer them up? And then create a series of better and better throughout the week. It's kind of a 20% project. Throughout the week, can they create or through the months, can they create a better and better card? So as they push that button, it lights up the cheeks of the robot. Or you know, you can put little tiny microcontrollers in them, which are basically those little chips, little black chips, but you can buy them in lots of different ways. Chibitronics has them, Adafruit has them, SparkFun has them. These little microcontrollers, little tiny Arduinos, basically, the tiniest ones you can get. And you can solder. You can actually solder on tape. So now kids are learning skills of soldering, which is something that we probably don't get to do a ton, in a really easy way because you're just using copper tape, which is a very big pad to put it on. You can see up in this one corner here that they're actually doing writing. And so just like you would maybe do some sketchbook or sketch notes as you go, or use colors to help students engage their brain as they're walking through things, you can also add in some circuitry. And you can have your own little quiz on the book, and you can make a quiz for another book, or you can use this for just helping them understand what things are. So lots of different ways there. A codable object, this is a picture of a laser cutter up here on the top, and here's that slider bar that I was talking about with, this is from High Tech Low Tech Group. So if you go to hightechlowtechgroup.org, a professor there at MIT ran this group, and she created this program in this software program basically called processing. And processing is maybe a little easier than an Arduino software, a little more graphic friendly. I think a lot of artists use it, but the nice thing about it is that she's already made the program, she's already made the code, but you can see it run, which is a great way for kids to be able to kind of see under the hood, if you may, of what's going on, and interact with something that's coded without having to actually learn the new language. So I really like that one. And you can see you can make a lamp basically just by printing this out and then putting it together following the instructions. You can use a laser cutter, or you can use a vinyl cutter, or you could even just cut it out by hand. But once again, as you move these sliders, these fractal patterns change, and I really like that as a math integration. Another math integration that we just saw Demco's Maker Bootcamp this summer was that they had done like string art, right? But they'd upsized this giant string art to use different angles, and drove, you know, pieces of wood into the ground in the neighborhood park, and they started making this giant string art. And now you're talking a lot of geometry, and at the same time you're solving problems, because how do you make a protractor that big? How do you make a compass? How do you get these angles on the right thing? So I thought that was a great, another math integration. Now, let's kind of talk a little bit. We talked about integration. Demco right now is working on creating a curriculum, and they have this framework that we're trying to create the curriculum into. So let me move into discussing what that is and kind of unpacking that a little bit. The way that Demco set it up, and I really like it, is they've set up 4 different levels of student engagement, but engagement's maybe not the best word, but levels of the educator taking their hands off, I guess is a better way of doing it. And so what we've done is we've said level 1 is going to be a very structured, almost a tutorial, kind of a tinkering exploration level. And really, you can see right here, there's 3 different steps of this. And what these steps do is they kind of help you walk through. And then all the integration points that I talked about, they're all in the curriculum as well, and you can kind of add those in as you like to bring life to the specific project. So let's say they're going to learn a structured activity, first level 1 activity. They've never learned straw bees, they've never done make do, cardboard, little connectors. And so you give them these different things, and you give them some basic knowledge, some basic vocabulary, and maybe even a little challenge to go with this, and you say, hey, kind of explore around this theme with these different tools that you have, and we're going to say, hey, we want you to use straw beads, or we want you to use make do, or Legos, but we're just going to step through these 3 things. We want you just to explore the platform, the product. We want you to create something that has a reason or a theme, and then we want you to reflect on it. And that reflection, it really is a very necessary part of any maker activity. So that's kind of the level 1 idea. And what that does is it really gets kids to feel like they can be successful, and you, the educator, to feel like, oh, I don't need to have it all figured out. We're just focusing on this. We've got some good guardrails on there, and I like using kind of it's like the bumpers of bowling, right? You put the things in the gutter so the ball just bounce back and forth. That's what this is about. And then we kind of open up the guardrails a little bit. We provide a little more space for students to choose, and you'll see a level 2 activity right there. Level 2 is more of a controlled activity. So it's not so structured this tutorial, but it's this controlled activity. And in a controlled activity, let me look at my steps here. I've got the notes right here. A controlled activity, we've kind of added a couple different things back to that why of making. We've added 2 initial steps, which are the plan and then a picking. So as you plan, you get to say, hey, why are we going to solve this theme? So this one is Mr. Maker. Mr. Maker is one of the curriculum guides, and I think there's a video that goes with that kind of explains that one particularly. But you know, he's got a challenge for, hey, he's got dirty windows. We need to clean the windows. What are we going to make to clean Mr. Maker's windows? And so as you walk through that in a controlled activity, you can say, okay, plan. Are you going to use connects? Are you going to use straw bees? What are you going to use to make a representation of this window cleaning apparatus that you're going to do? And then once you've planned and maybe done some drawing, so we can learn some drawing in there, and we can learn some, you know, yeah, this is going to solve my problem better, so therefore I'm going to pick a product. Now one set of kids might pick straw bees, and the other kids may pick connects, and that's great, because now you see different students around the room, not just lock in step making the exact same thing, going, oh, what are you making? Oh, what are you making? But they're having to solve it on their own and say, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this, and fail, which is a good word, it's not a bad word. They fail a little bit, and then they step forward through that failure, and on the other side they've got something better, right? So it's this whole iterative process, and that's that design thinking. If you keep going from empathy, it moves on to basically creating and exploring and testing and evaluating and iterating, just this cycle of trying, it didn't work, or it did work, refining it, making it better, trying again, making it better. So that gives a little more space for that uncontrolled activity to do that. Level 3 guided activities are, you know, that's where they could solve it in kind of a wacky way, and I love this because it's this out-of-the-box thinking. You still give them a challenge. Maybe Mr. Maker this time is on vacation, in the particular curriculum here. He's on vacation and he's still got dirty windows, but they're in the Dubai towers, right? And they're just crazy tall towers. Well, takes a whole different type of system to clean those windows than it would a 4th or a 24-story window. So once again, the students engage in this process and they say, okay, what am I going to use now? Am I going to make a scaffolding? Well, first of all, let's give them some vocab. What is a scaffolding? Do they need a Boston chair? What are these different things to get them up there? So we work them through there, and once again, they still pick, they still explore, they still decide which platform they're going to use, but maybe now they use Connects and Strawbees, and now they're putting Strawbees and Connects together, and they're making something, or they're using Legos together with little bits. I mean, this is where you let them kind of put 2 different platforms together, and what that does is it shows that there's so many different solutions to the same problem. So I really like that. And in this framework, once again, we're taking our hands off more. So as an educator, from an anxiety standpoint, if you may, you walk in and you've got one platform to start with, one product to work with. All the kids are kind of doing a tutorial but solving a little different. You got the excitement in the room. The level 2 activities, you get to maybe walk around the room more because now they're into it and you're not really telling them how to solve the problem. You're just telling them how to fix the mistakes or maybe jump ahead sooner or say, hey, did you see Jessica's over there? You should go take a look at Jessica's idea, right? And so you're starting to help them explore. And then guided, you're really at this point, you're just kind of walking around the room asking questions. Hey, did you ever think about this? Did you ever think about this? I find it as a great style of teaching. If you've never taught in a maker classroom before, I really enjoy it because you just get to walk around and you're helping students almost on a not really their peer, but in that kind of a capacity of, hey, we're all learning together. I don't know. I've never thought of the problem like that. That's a really cool idea. What if have you thought about this? You should check on them. Oh, they did something like it over here. Oh, I remember, right? And so you have these conversations instead of just saying, no, you spelled it wrong, right? It's more of a flexible style of teaching. And then level 4 activities right now are really just that open-ended. This would probably be a longer activity. Students coming in after school, maybe they're doing something for science fair, but they're really meant to make something meaningful for themselves, their school, their community, and that once again goes back to that empathy side, where they interview and they're making something not just for you, the teacher, because you said to, or because the theme said to, but they're inventing their own thing. So let's move on. So we've talked about the why behind making. We've talked about integration. We've talked about Demco's particular framework on how to kind of help you not have that anxiety as you're walking through. And here's another aspect of that, because it's not all about us. And I know it's, as an educator for over 15 years, you get locked in your little classroom, and that can be a good thing and a bad thing, right? You're in charge of this group of students, but at the same time, you don't have that time together with each other. So I really find 3 different ways to add making to your school that have worked really well when I worked with different school clients. And one of them is, easiest thing is to create a little group of disruptor cohort. And that disruptor cohort is really just that you find people that are willing to try to integrate in different subjects and different grade levels in your school. I like taking maybe 10 people, not all the people that are just ready to go, but maybe some people that are a little resistant to change, and saying, hey, would you try this with me? And when you do that, you get this group of people trying to disrupt the norm, and that's a good thing, right? That's what startups do. That's what Roku did. That's what Uber did. That's what Airbnb did, right? They're disrupting things. And so if we want innovation in our schools, I think we kind of have to ask ourselves the question, are we willing to try something new ourselves with our different teaching styles? So I would, I'd push you on that to say, hey, try to create a disruptor cohort, 5, 10 people, meet once a month, talk about how you can integrate, how you can even work together and collaborate. Number 2, I've talked about a lot, but if you're making a product in the real world, in the bigger world, and you make a product and nobody buys it, it's because you made a product that nobody really wanted, right? So if we're doing the same thing, and this really comes back to us as educators, if we're not ready to say, okay, where could my teaching be better? Where could this unit have more richness to it? Where are the students? Where am I kind of stalled out? I've got drawers of things that I can open up and I can go teach tomorrow because I've done them for so many years. And that's great, but when I was a young teacher, I was making all those things. And as an older educator, I'm not making them as much. So where are some ways that I can look at the pain points in my life as the educator and say, what would actually help me professionally and help my students at the same time? What's my pain point? What can I do? What's my classroom's pain point? How can I solve that? And then you're basically using the design thinking process right there, and you're integrating and iterating to try to figure that out and be okay yourself to fail. It's okay to fail, right? You need to make room in your education setting to say, hey, yeah, that didn't work as well. But once again, you're gonna create, you're gonna explore, you're gonna create, and you're gonna reflect. So this is starting that pain point right there. And we did a summer workshop this summer, online video tutorials from different educators, and this was one of the big parts of it. It was like, how are we gonna push on ourselves? And the third thing, which I find really works well into making into your school, is to use those kids as change agents. So once you have a kid in your classroom that can use little bits or make do or straw bees or electronics or Arduino, is there another teacher, maybe in your disruptor cohort, maybe not, that has a project at the end of the year that you could somehow talk to the student, or if you're an administrator, that you create space and you say every educator needs to do one open-ended project in the year, and then you allow kids to fill that. So then once again, that's ministering to a pain point for me, because now I don't have to create the actual end. I just get to create the space for kids to fill with their making. And it might be a diorama, it might be a little bit something, it might not look really pretty at the end of the day, but kids are going to bring it in, and you can evaluate the process that they went through, and you're going to talk to them, and you're going to learn a lot from what they actually did. So just making a space is a great way to do that. Back to integration, I do like to put in practicals, so we'll get a little more practical here. People ask me all the time, okay, great, you talked about the why, you talked about integration, hey, we'll do a disruptor cohort, we've got some pain points, I've got some kids that change agents. Okay, now finally, can we get back to those steps of how do I integrate this and what do I buy? Well, it's a tough one, because once again it comes back to, are you integrating in history? What does that project maybe need? Maybe you just need a makey-makey. Maybe you need some little bits. Maybe you need just craft cart of tape and scissors and some copper tape and some LEDs. I don't know. But when a school comes to me and says, hey Mark, what's your top four? These are kind of my top four. And they change a little bit, but these are my favorites. Laser cutter, vinyl cutter, if you can afford one, they're great. There's some inexpensive vinyl cutters on the market, Silhouette, Cricut, are a couple different brands out there, and then there's some more expensive, larger format ones like General, GCC, I think is one. And then a laser cutter. There really is no good entry-level laser cutter yet. Glowforge is one that's been trying to get out, but I haven't seen them come out yet. I think Dremel just launched one at the New York Maker Faire that may be coming out as a small tabletop unit. Universal Laser or Epilog also are good laser cutters. And the nice thing about that is you get to tell the kids how to draw in a way where actually the computer can follow that line that they draw. So this could be done on an iPad. It can be done on vector drawing software, basically a line that can be followed as a vector. And they get to learn Inkscape. They get to learn all these industry things that they could use at a later date. And then they get to just rapidly prototype. So if I cut something on cardboard with a vinyl cutter or a laser cutter, and my hole's in the wrong spot when I fold it up or put it together, I just cut it again. I move my hole, I cut it again. It doesn't take that long, right? There's some, I think these, if you can see them in the back, those are laser cut. You can do some really intricate shapes up there, those little 120-degree angle things up on the pegboard. Little bits, I love little bits. They are a bit expensive to get into. You really do need a couple, maybe a few sets to have enough to do something with to start out with. This picture right here is actually a Easter egg turning lathe that my daughter and I made during Easter last year, and it has some different controllers, and those are pop bottle lids. And I didn't know how to. I just said, well, usually a lathe, if you want to spin something, you have to chuck up the end, and I kind of did this, And she's like, oh, just a sec. And she ran to the recycle bin, and she grabbed some pop bottle lids, and she, got some glue dots from downstairs and some motors and some Velcro and some Strictly Bricks Legos right there. And she put them together and then put a marker on it and started coloring the egg as it spun around. She could change the speed of it, and it would go faster, slower. I think next iteration would be, also putting on like a pulse session of the little bits that made the pen move back and forth at a certain rate, so you can make some different zigzags. But I love little bits. I love them for third graders. I love them for 82-year-olds. I mean, they're just amazing. And when I take them to corporate, I do a lot with corporate clients with little bits because they have a low entry point and a really high ceiling of what you can do with them. And don't be afraid to blend make do and straw bees and cardboard creations into it. Make the tail of the cat wag back and forth when you snap your fingers and when you put your hand over its eyes with the light sensor. You're really teaching a lot of if then that, if this then that, kind of a cause and effect relationship too. So there's a lot of great stuff. Arduino robotics. Arduinos are really pretty cheap. You can get them from Adafruit, you can get them from SparkFun, you can get them online, just the basic Uno version, but there's so many great codes out there, and there's even code programs. Tinkercad just released something yesterday, I believe, that uses a block program thing like Scratch, MIT Scratch, which is basically just a block programming language where you drag in, if this happens, then do this, and then you can pipe it or you can download it to the actual programmable board. And Arduino is just a microcontroller that you can give directions to, and then it continually does those directions based on what you told it to do. It's just a set of directions. And robotics. Robotics are great. The Ozobots that you saw, Sphero. There's a lot of great different platforms out there that you can use. Makey, if I just had to pick one thing, I'd probably just pick Makey because it's a really fun, easy way to go, and it provides so much integration. This picture here is a Dip Hop, which is the Pizza Hut did it. Check it out, Dip Hop, and that you type in and it does all these different little sounds. So when you touch it, just starts these beats of these loops going over with pizza because they wired them together. It's pretty cool. So anyway, those are my top 4. Back to this again. This stool that we talked about of standing on, I get it. We need accountability, and so I do want to talk a little bit about assessment. And what we've done here is creative confidence communication. That's going to be a little more qualitative, right? You're going to need to see what they're doing. But skills of knowledge, you're going to be able to just check off that they did that. And once again, on this, there's something that you can click on and on the final slide and go to these different rubrics. But the mindset rubric I would like to talk about here just a minute, that one of those legs of the stool. And what we did when I was at the American School in Japan is we broke this up for 9th graders into a way where it was almost like these slider bars. From one side here, everybody starts at developing mastery. All the sliders are down to 0. And as they start walking through different projects, you start to talk to them about, oh, I think you're getting more on the approaching mastery on this particular level of creative confidence. Or you're starting to really understand the mindset of making. Same thing, communication. You're doing a better job communicating. And then finally, mastery. And here's the important part of this. I don't want every student to have all the sliders to the top. I don't know if that's quite realistic, but I do want them to have maybe 3 of the sliders all the way over to mastery, and the other half of them in approaching mastery, and maybe they have 2 left in developing mastery. And everybody's a little bit different because once again, we're all different, right? I'm better in one thing than somebody else in my class, and I've got different passions. So let's help them do that. So you can read about this. I'll just be real quick, but unsure of the next steps in the design process there, creative confidence. That's where everybody starts. We're all kind of unstep. We're all kind of unsure. But as we move down the mastery level, we finally get to, hey, we're just demonstrating a confidence and independence with the design process, and I deal with my setbacks and my failures with resilience, right? And you can change the language of this a little bit. And this is once of all also downloadable that you can grab. So leave it at that. You got to always put a picture of your kids, right? So here's a picture of my kids here in the garage, and they made something. I think they'd just come back from Japan. The license plate looks a little bit different, but who knows? And the neighbor girl, I've got 3 girls there, and the neighbor girls there in the middle, sandwiched in between. Got helmet, safety first here. This is good. But the point of this is that I've got, if you could see this lab that we're in, we've got a carving mill, we've got a laser cutter, we've got more electronics and robotics and drones than anybody really should have access to. But they can come into this lab whenever they want to, and at the end of the day, they would still rather say, Dad, where's the tape? Where's the cardboard? Where's the paper? And they make it because it's not about the tools that we use, it's about that process of why we're doing what we're doing. And so sometimes paper and tape is the most effective way to making, and so don't feel like you have to just have this big section to get it all in there. So that I say before making comes mindset, just remember that. Here's some resources and links. I've got some bookmarks. Stanford FabLearn Fellow, fablearn.org is a great place for some information. Startup Digest for Maker. Year in the Making was that summer professional development. And then right here, free ebook called Meaningful Making. And the Meaningful Making ebook is a ton of resources. You can download it. It was created by the first cohort of Stanford FabLearn Fellows. And there's a whole bunch of tutorials there too. And once again, those are all linked in the online version of this presentation. So if you want to get to that online version, I've made a short link there for you. It's http://tiny.cc and then Maker Framework, capital M, capital F. And that would link you to the same presentation where you can actually click on the different links that I talked about. If you want to get a hold of me on Twitter, I'm right there, or at DesignCase, it's just mark@designcase.co. We are too cheap to buy the M, so we don't have .com, sorry, just .co. But we are in Colorado, so it works out. So anyway, that's really the basis, and I know Matt had some questions that I think we're going to go over, and any questions that might come up, so I'd love to be able to answer those as well. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Mark. It looks like we do have a little bit of time for a couple questions from our listeners. And just so to remind everybody, the full Q&A will be emailed you to next week. So if we don't get to any of your questions today, look for those next week. The first question, we've had several inquiries about how to integrate making when space is at a premium. So Mark, any thoughts on how to do making in a small space?
Yeah, I think once again it comes back to that paper and tape mentality. Making isn't always about the mega lab that has every aspect of things, and quite honestly, depending what range your kids are at, it can be almost too much space, right? I really like craft carts. I don't know if you can see back here, I've got some IKEA cart here, and we just put some different things on these different carts and roll them around. So that's a great way. I like to just have a few carts that are something that can be taken to room, and on those carts I typically put paper, tape, cardboard, some recyclables, things that we cut, recyclable, and I really like aluminum foil. That's one that's not often put on there, but it's a great thing because you can crumple it up and you can fold it up and make it into different things that you want to represent and for prototyping, and really give that idea of a student saying, hey, I want you to make a blank. Well, then they get to represent this, and they can kind of fold it all up and make something pretty quickly, so it's accessible. On the space side of things, if you take your regular tables and you turn them so that they're facing each other, you make just a bigger space. You can do that in the regular classroom. If you have big tables where you can actually gang them together, that's great. Floor space is fine. Kids enjoy it's that flexible seating and changing. Buy some different rugs, put them on there, and put some of the different products and different maybe stations that you're creating for these different maker aspects. Put them on different sections of the rug and have students walk around there. So space, if we have a place to teach, I think you have a place to make. It doesn't really have to be much different. The biggest part of it, I think, would be organization and how do you get those. So I would say have stations around the room where students can pick things up and then have them well labeled when they put them away. Because if you don't have them labeled, they're not going to get put away in the right spot. Craft carts, once again, are a great thing. And that really helps just make a flexible space that you can change with before. If you're doing something and you actually want to have a maker space in a small space, you can do that as well. Once again, I like rolling carts, things that can park away. There's a lot of old chemistry labs in the world, and they usually have back storage, and Stanford last year did a pilot with Google in Palo Alto, East Palo Alto schools, and they took these old chemistry labs and they basically put everything that was a computer and a vinyl cutter on a an old multimedia cart and some supplies down below, and then they parked it all back in that chemistry back storage area where they had it. And then when the chemistry class wasn't in session and they were using it as a maker room, they just pulled them all out and parked them all around. So once again, you don't have to have them always set up. I think making things mobile, moving them, parking them, and then bringing them out when you need them is a great way to use that space efficiently.
All right, great. Thanks for those insights, Mark. Next question. You talked a lot about integrating making into the classroom, but how about standards? How do you correlate some of those activities to NGSS or Common Core standards?
Yeah, I love having the NGSS. I think it's a great framework to work with for science. And because they have engineering in 3rd and 5th grade, I believe, a component of it, it's really easy to grab engineering in there. But at the same time, this is such a great integration point. We used NGSS standards in American School in Japan, and what we did was we took the pollinator unit. There's a pollinator unit, I believe, 2nd grade, and they had to talk about pollination. It could be birds, it could be bats, or it could be bugs, wind, transport, different things. So instead of just talking about pollination in the flowers, they said, well, why don't we have kids actually create their own bug, create their own insect that could see how well it works as a pollinator, right? So now instead of just seeing videos and doing research and stuff, we brought them into a space, into a lab or a library or mock lab. You could do it in lots of different ways. Brought them in and kind of did this kickoff project where we said, hey, I've got this flower, and it was like a red Solo cup with hot glue with some frills to make it look like a flower, and I shoved it on a wooden dowel and then kind of made it made it out there. And then we took some powder, I think powdered sugar or some flour. We dropped it on the inside of this cup, and we said, okay, your challenge is to create your idea of an insect, and then we want you to once it's all done, and you've created from recycled materials, pipe cleaners, string, tape, all these different things, just craft materials, create it, and then we want you to come over and we want you to have it go, get some pollen in the flower, and then when it comes out, we want to see how much is attached to it. And so we took a black piece of paper and we took some circles, just a cup, drew a line around some circle, and we just did a tap test. Told them 1, 2, 3, taps over number 1, over circle number 2, over circle number 3. So now we're integrating science, hypothesis, we're talking about scientific method, we're really integrating it in there, and we're aligning perfectly to the NGSS. And what happens when students learn this way? Well, let me start this way. If I asked you what your favorite lesson was back when you were an elementary student, it probably didn't come to mind was a worksheet that you handed in. It probably wasn't like, wow, I got this great worksheet back and I just remember this awesome worksheet. And there's a place for worksheets, but when you have this insect that you created, I go, oh, I remember this time that we did this, and I went in there and then I came back and I took the legs off because my legs didn't work, and I put it back on, and I learned that insects hold pollen in lots of different ways, and now you can talk about the different flower components, and they learn all these different things that they're creating these pictures in their head that more information is going to actually hook into and stay into. So I really like that. There's there's cities units that integrate well. Common Core has a lot of different integration points for English and history, especially if you're willing to kind of add coding to it and even just make a test review with Makey or with Scratch or something that, once again, it solves a pain point. It also checks off a standard. I mean, if you can knock out 3 different things, that's such a great way to be able to put things together. So NGSS has a great points. I did a whole curriculum alignment to NGSS, and I know there's other people out there on the K-12 maker groups and other people that have done these alignments out there. So there's a lot of different ways to align it. But once again, it's easier to be asked specifically, and then my brain goes to the certain questions than to say, okay, what aligns to what? Basically, the point is it all aligns. You just need to find a creative way to do it. And as an educator, you're making the curriculum content connections rather than making a physical product, right? You're making ways that are going to, how can I knock off 3 different standards and have kids have this rich experience all together and deburden myself in the same process? That's kind of what you're looking for as you're trying to align things for yourself. Anything else, Matt?
I think we are probably about out of time, Mark. Well, we'd really like to thank you for sharing your vision and insights with us today, and we hope that everybody was able to take away some newfound knowledge to help support their initiatives in their makerspace. Just to remind everybody that a recording of this webcast will be available on the Demco Ideas and Inspirations website next week. That's ideas.demco.com, and you can review the presentation and share it with your colleagues. Mark, the link that you provided, we heard from a couple people, was not working, but I'm betting Mark will get that working. But otherwise, the slides will be sent out as well, so you can get that information and click from the slides.
Great. Maybe I didn't make it public, so I'll go make it public when we hang up here.
All right, great. As we conclude the webinar, you'll be receiving a survey to let us know how we did. That's really helpful to make sure we're addressing topics that are relevant to you and that everything's working as it should be. So please take a moment to give us your feedback and thoughts on future webinar topics. So thank you again for joining us, and thank you, Mark, and everybody have a wonderful afternoon.
You're welcome. Thanks, Matt. Have a great day.